History isn't just shaped by kings, wars, or revolutions. Sometimes the most powerful force is hidden inside the human mind. Psychological quirks, biases, fears, and illusions have changed the course of nations, led to disasters, and even sparked revolutions. Today, we'll uncover 20 historical events shaped by forgotten psychological quirks. Let's dive in. First up, the Challenger disaster in 1986. When NASA engineers raised concerns about O-rings failing in cold weather, their voices were drowned out. Everyone wanted consensus. That groupthink silenced critical doubts, resulting in the Challenger exploding shortly after launch. Then there's the charge of the Light Brigade. In 1854, during the Crimean War, soldiers followed suicidal orders despite knowing the risks. Blind obedience to authority led them into a valley of cannons. The result? A heroic but tragic massacre. Let us travel back to the Salem witch trials of 1692. When strange illnesses and accidents struck the town, people didn't search for logic. Instead, they actively sought evidence that confirmed their fears of witchcraft. Over 20 innocent people were executed, fueled by mass hysteria and confirmation bias. Have you heard of tulip mania? In the Netherlands, between 1636 and 1637, people paid fortunes for single tulip bulbs. Why? Because everyone else was buying them. This herd mentality drove prices to absurd heights until the market suddenly collapsed, ruining countless investors. Next, the Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. US planners thought overthrowing Fidel Castro would be easy. They were blinded by overconfidence, underestimating his forces and overestimating local support. The result was one of America's most humiliating foreign policy failures. The stock market crash of 1929 is another key example. When stocks began to dip, fear spread like wildfire. Driven by loss aversion, people started panic selling to avoid any further losses, which triggered a devastating chain reaction. The crash wasn't just financial, it spiraled into the decade-long Great Depression. Let's talk about Napoleon's Russian campaign of 1812. The brilliant general assumed his grand army could handle Russia's brutal winter. He severely underestimated the vast distances, the lack of supplies, and the freezing conditions. This planning fallacy cost him hundreds of thousands of his best soldiers. Remember the famous headline, Dewey defeats Truman in 1948? Pollsters relied on early telephone survey data that made it seem obvious Dewey would win. Newspapers even printed the headline before all the votes were counted. They fell for the availability heuristic, ignoring data that was harder to get. But the late votes told a different story. Truman was victorious. During World War II, France anchored its entire defense strategy on the methods of World War I. They poured immense resources into building the Maginot Line, a static wall of fortifications, but Germany simply bypassed it with new mobile tactics, proving that anchoring to old ideas can blind us to modern innovation. The Chernobyl disaster in 1986 serves as a chilling warning. During a safety test, reactor operators saw clear warning signs of a major problem, but they assumed nothing truly catastrophic could happen. This normalcy bias made them ignore the escalating danger until the worst nuclear disaster in history unfolded. The Titanic, launched in 1912, was marketed as unsinkable. This created a powerful optimism bias, leading the builders and crew to believe it was invincible. As a result, the ship carried far fewer lifeboats than needed. When it struck an iceberg and sank, this overconfidence contributed to the loss of over 1,500 lives. During the McCarthy era in the 1950s, fear of communism spread faster than facts. Senator McCarthy's baseless accusations ruined countless lives and careers. This fear contagion fueled a nationwide paranoia, turning neighbors into enemies and undermining civil liberties. In the 1940s, the world's most brilliant scientists worked on the Manhattan Project under military orders to create the atomic bomb. Authority bias made many of them set aside their ethical doubts and focus on the technical challenge. The outcome was the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Think about the Great Fire of London. In 1666, when the fire first began in a small bakery, many citizens saw the smoke but assumed someone else would take care of it. This phenomenon, known as social proof or the bystander effect, delayed a coordinated response, allowing the flames to consume much of the city. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 highlights our resistance to change. The Byzantines clung to their ancient, formidable walls, believing they'd hold against any attack, as they always had. This status quo bias blinded them to the new threat posed by the Ottoman Empire's massive cannons, which ultimately broke through their defenses. During the Vietnam War in the 1960s, US leaders continued sending troops and resources even as evidence of failure mounted. This escalation of commitment, the psychological need to justify past investments, made them throw good money and lives after bad, unwilling to admit defeat. Tragically, history repeated itself with the Space Shuttle Columbia in 2003. Engineers noticed significant foam tile damage during launch, but because similar, smaller issues hadn't caused disaster before, they fell into a normalcy bias, assuming it was safe. On re-entry, the damaged section failed and the shuttle disintegrated. Even the great Napoleon wasn't immune. At the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the brilliant but overconfident emperor underestimated the coordination and resilience of the British and Prussian forces. His arrogance led him to make critical mistakes that cost him his final battle and his empire. And what about the French Revolution? In 1789, rumors spread like wildfire that nobles were plotting against the peasants. This panic quickly transformed into herd behavior as mobs formed and stormed the Bastille. Fear, amplified by the crowd, turned into a full-blown revolution. Finally, the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Both the US and the USSR were terrified of losing strategic ground to the other. According to prospect theory, the fear of loss is more powerful than the prospect of gain. This loss aversion made both superpowers willing to risk nuclear war. Only tense, careful negotiation prevented a global catastrophe. These stories prove a powerful truth. History is not just shaped by leaders or battles, but by the invisible quirks of the human mind. From fear to overconfidence, from bias to blind obedience, psychology has left its fingerprints on every chapter of our past. So the next time you make a decision, remember one small bias can change everything. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey through the mind's impact on history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more content.